ICP, from the people that are the customers. They're busy. I ask them, what are you doing to stay up to speed? And they say, yeah, we listen to audiobooks and podcasts. But I don't know what's the right modality for it. I don't know what's the right content.
The biggest thing is...
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast. Today is a coaching episode. We're going to talk about messaging, funnels, bringing people in with a private podcast. And our guest today is Yuval Yeret, who is the principal at Yeret Agility. Welcome, Yuval. We're really excited to dive into this with you today.
Hi, Lindsay. Great to be here.
Thanks. Obviously, coming off of a super choppy intro. Well done. No, we're excited that you're here today, and we're really excited to talk a little bit about B2B. A lot of times people come to us and say you serve a lot of the creator space, personal brands, that kind of thing. And that's true. That's where a lot of our messaging kind of goes. And so Yuval is working on moving into that, building a personal brand, but he serves a very B2B market. So we've had a couple of people on the show who do serve this space. It's definitely something that private podcasts have done well in. So we want to help you with this, and we are excited to dive in. So why don't you give a brief intro about your business, what you're building, and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a plumber. I'm a plumber for organizations, for IT organizations, product organizations. And what that means is I help unclog, streamline ways of working for people. I help people deliver more value, deliver better outcomes, create better flow in the way that they're working. I've been doing that for decades at this point. My background is in network engineering and operating system, engineering, and I've developed stuff that, cares about the plumbing in the IT space. And then over the years, I've started focusing on the organizational stuff. I've worked with B2B for many years now. It's not that I'm entering the B2B space, but like you said, being a solo consultant, it's more and more important to have a personal brand, to have a niche that, that people can associate. They can say, Yuval is the thing for that. Yuval is the guy you want to talk to when you're trying to fix your agile theater, build something that's better than just a feature factory, when you want to build an empowered product organization, or whatever is the positioning that I land on. And this is exactly the journey that I'm on right now, trying to figure out what exactly is that positioning. What am I other than, being a plumber? Maybe that's the name that I end up with on the business card, but maybe it's something a bit more specific and nuanced. And when would people talk to me versus dozens or hundreds of other individuals or companies that work in this space?
Yes. Okay. So just pointing out for the listeners, very early in kind of building this consulting business and changing how you get leads into your business. And you're also looking to potentially launch a group program sometime, a coaching program, a way to serve these folks in bulk. So maybe a little bit different of the way that you've been serving people so far. So I think a lot of people listening will probably resonate with this as well. Just, getting into service and kind of making that business model pivot a little bit. And so you're in that discovery phase, and we would help with that for sure.
I mean, just a bit more clarity. I'm actually working the other way around. So I've done plenty of work with some of the world's biggest organizations on doing this. My work is mostly advisory, consulting work, working with an organization. I am both trying to figure out the personal branding that would go beyond their word of mouth referral way that I've been brought into organizations. How do I scale that? As well as trying to figure out, like you said, is there a service modality that, would be interesting to pursue to complement, just the advisory work, to work with a group of individuals and help them together.
Perfect. Yeah, that's really helpful. Okay, I've got questions. So because this is where I used to live in this space when I was in corporate. So this is also very near.
Sorry to bring you
heart.
back to it, Nora.
No, it's good. I delivered a lot of great stuff when I was in corporate, and not all of it was messy. Some of it was 100% messy. And I think I'm even more proud of those shipments because it was so messy and we survived. So some really great memories of that too. Okay, couple things. Anytime, so I hear you say, you're still going to pursue being a trusted advisor, I assume highly paid consultant for, you're not eliminating any specific target market. So you're happy to work with Fortune 500 companies. You're also happy to work with, maybe lower 7-figure startups who, this would be on their radar as they start to scale their business, right? And I will say this.
I call it scale up. I call it the scale up time when
it's painful.
If it's a scale up, if it's a company that has, 30 people, a couple of teams, it might be painful, but they don't necessarily need my expertise. My expertise is mostly on scaling. So when they start to scale up, when they do their C round, let's say, when they are starting to see cross-functional challenges between product and marketing and some other parts of the organization, that's where it gets really painful and they need some extra help. But they probably don't go and talk to Accenture, Deloitte, and the big consulting firms at that point.
Correct. Yes. Okay. That all makes sense. Yes. And I was at ClickFunnels when they first, had that, where they were in that sweet spot of scaling. A few other SaaS companies and a few other just from mergers and acquisitions that kind of prompted that scaling because you're inheriting software and people and all that stuff. So you have lots of different areas or different companies that you can work with. I will say this, typically Fortune 500 companies are usually they want to hire the consultant. They're looking for more one-on-one support. They're not going to be interested in a group program. I think if you're looking ultimately to have, and I think that's fine. Because it sounds like you're still going to do that work. If you're looking ultimately to create a group program to help more than one company at once, which can be somewhat challenging because depending on how you handle that, obviously, the vulnerabilities that they have to expose and they have to talk to you in a group program. Sometimes they're not super comfortable with that. You can get around that with NDAs and all the stuff and, how you structure that program. But sometimes startups would be easier to put into that group program because they're not going to necessarily be able to afford, that high paying consultant, that one-on-one fee. So you've got some options here. I will say this, that you can position, it'll change a little bit in terms of how you talk about the problems, because clearly going from an 8-figure company to a 9-figure company or a 10-figure company, or going from 30 employees to 100 employees, that's a very different challenge than like going from 5 to 30. That's still scaling, but just at a different scale, right? So it's different problems that we can talk to. However, the problem itself, which is scaling, not getting bogged down, people who are going to want, pretty pragmatic ways to increase speed, increase throughput, increase alignment. Like a lot of those are pretty similar desires for companies that are scaling no matter what level they're scaling at. Some are, how silos can be at an 8 or a 9-figure company. That looks very different than when silos are starting at like a 7-figure company, right? So it's just a little bit different. I do think you can aim, depends on where you want to go and where kind of you want to aim your messaging. You want to make sure if you aim at the higher, like that Fortune 500, that you're not alienating a startup company. Or you could have 2 separate podcasts as lead magnets, or it's really, we're going to say it's a lead magnet, but it's really a demonstration of your expertise. That's ultimately what this is going to be, right? It does both. It's a lead magnet that's going to help someone that's going to want to exchange their email address in exchange for that value. But it's also a demonstration of your expertise. So you just want to make sure whatever positioning we pick, if you want to go after both, it's enough to reach the higher level, but not enough to alienate the smaller folks. That's going to be the key.
I think we touched on something very interesting, Nora. The goal of the lead magnet. And to be honest, I'm on the fence on whether it even needs to be a lead magnet.
Okay.
Or whether it's enough or more important for it to be a demonstration of my expertise. And that actually brings questions that I have around, does it need to be a private podcast? Or does it make sense to do a limited series? Or, I'm a huge believer in audio. myself and from what I hear from my ICP, from the people that are the customers.
They're busy. Yep.
They're busy. They like podcasts. I ask them, what are you doing to stay up to speed? And they say, we listen to audiobooks and podcasts. Makes total sense. That's me as well. But I don't know what's the right modality for it. I don't know what's the right content. I'm not sure about these things. And that's actually what I would love for us to explore. So there are still questions around what's the right positioning, what's the right language. I'd love for us to focus on what's the right way to test that with whatever I have, how to test that with a podcast or an audio of one sort or the other, and how to leverage audio to build my brand with people, get people to warm up to my perspective, to check for themselves if I'm their person or not.
Yeah, if you're
in this context. Yeah.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I think you hit in something very important, and that is audio is the delivery mechanism that will reach busy people, especially people who are already listening to podcasts. It's going to be a lot more difficult for them to read a PDF, to even sit down, to remember that they downloaded it, to have time to consume it without getting distracted. I mean, if in that role, you're getting hit a bazillion times a day, whether it's the head of product, the VP of engineering, like most of the people who are going to consume this content and be searching for it are getting pinged thousands of times a day. And it's going to be a lot more challenging to be able to reach them. But with audio, you can hit those pockets of time, where that they do have, that they're not sitting in front of their computer. So I do like audio for this. What we call it, whether it's an audio series, whether it's an exclusive audio, a private podcast, because they're already familiar with podcasts, you can test that. And that's easy to kind of interchange to say exclusive audio series or private podcast exclusive. Like there's exclusive private audio series. There's lots of words that we can interchange. The biggest thing is I need them to care about the content in order for them to put in their email address in order to exchange it.
One thing, Nora, Yuval, you also mentioned in your onboarding kind of form that we do for these coaching sessions, the difference between like private and public potentially. Are you naming limited series something that you're thinking would go public and it would just live as a public podcast as
maybe
a series? Is that what you're thinking?
I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I agree. There's one thing which is the name, and there's one thing which is the format. And
that's what I wanted to make sure.
I'm wondering whether private versus public, and how important is it for me to have emails? I mean, I would like to have emails, but if I can get people to listen without the email and then they hand raise at the appropriate time, I would be cool with that.
Okay, so we have thoughts on this. I'm sure we do. Yeah, I've seen in the space a little bit. There's definitely some public podcasters who are talking about limited series shows that are searchable and findable on an app. And so that's how you get, a new lead, is to find it. I hesitate on recommending it only because public podcast searching in apps is not super great. And so they talk about it like it's SEO, and that's not quite the behavior of a podcast listener. What we've seen through the data over 20 plus years, most podcast listeners are listening to a podcast because they were told to listen to this podcast by someone they know, whether it's another influencer or someone they follow, a friend, a parent, whatever, right? It's really word of mouth. Now, I know podcasting has always tried to figure out how do we recommend the right shows and everything. And, there might be some evidence from your ICP that they are going into an app. You said no. Okay. So we're already hearing that. That's what I like to bring up about public podcasts.
No, discovery is a challenge.
It's terrible. Okay.
But it's the same challenge for, private podcasts as well.
Yes, but it is the same challenge in that you have to put the link places and people have to recommend that. And there has to be leads coming in. But that email address is worth it, because if you have to do that work for both of them, having the email address, not only is it a person who's raised their hand, they've given that, Nora calls it currency. The email address is a form of currency. It is money because we don't give it to everyone. We definitely don't give the correct one to everyone. that hand raising is like, we're talking about a hot lead. If you throw it out to a public podcast and you share it, it feels like it's more shareable. And it feels like, I think that there's more likelihood that someone's going to stumble on it. And I'm not saying that people don't stumble on public podcasts and convert. They totally do. But with what we're saying especially early on in your business, and as you're testing these messaging and everything, you need to talk to these people. You don't want a random download. Like, that does nothing for you or your business. What you want is a connection with the person listening. And the best way to get that is to go kind of like omni-channel. Like, you want to be able to email them or DM them in like LinkedIn or whatever. And that, by them, you giving your email address, they kind of expect that. That's why they've given you their email address. They expect some connection or contact with you.
It's a better test. In my context, it's also a better test,
yeah,
whether it's
agreed.
resonating than around.
Exactly.
But
And then
that
you
makes
could get,
sense.
yeah, and you could talk to them too. We get this a lot, like, oh, I only have 20 subscribers. Like, I don't know what to do. It's like, if you don't know what to do, like, get on a coffee chat with them and start to talk to them, especially at the stage of business that you're in, I think, with this new pivot that you're doing, not stage of business from a like expertise experience. But anyways, I just wanted to point that out, Nora, because I had a feeling that was
Good
it.
call.
The language, totally. But besides just putting it out there for free for anyone to download versus having them opt in is a decision that lots of people have to make.
Yes, agreed. And if you're going to do that, I would recommend putting an ebook or something on Amazon and capitalizing on that traffic, because that traffic actually would work better than being discovered in a podcast. So if you're going to put together something for free
Effort.
traffic for Discover, I would start with the audio, then I would transcribe it, use an ebook, and then I would throw that on Amazon for keyword searches there. That's what I would do. But I would start with private audio. Now, positioning. This is where it gets fun. Okay. So as I look at, you've got options, and you've got a lot of options here. I could probably
But let's not spend too much time on positioning, because I'm also doing other work on it. I appreciate your unique take, but how to, within the positioning space that I'm in, how do I bring people to a private podcast? How do I use it to strengthen my positioning or to
So let's talk about your current positioning. So why don't you describe your current positioning so that we can then, there's probably some small optimizations or some optimizations we can make there, and then we can talk about, let's drive traffic to it.
Sure. You know what? I'm gonna read to you from my website.
Okay.
See if it resonates for you. So, are you interested in agility but refusing to buy into the agile theater? Maybe you believe agility is the key to regaining speed and traction, but you think there's too much dogma, process BS surrounding it. Maybe we've even tried it before, and you're looking for a pragmatic path towards agility with laser-focused interventions that help you scale rather than an army of coaches to descend on your organization. You already have the people and leaders that can do this, but you're looking for somebody to help them think the right way, maybe guide a little bit. You don't have a lot of time to do this, but want something that reduces the risk of going down the wrong path. I help leaders scale their organizations without slowing down, improving their throughput, speed, and outcomes by leveraging flow and nuanced agility, while avoiding the dogma and process BS of agile theater.
Perfect. And what's the name of your private podcast?
Let's see. Should you pursue a product transformation? I created this short, no-fluff, podcast-style audio series called the Navigating the Agile Product Operating Model Landscape to help leaders like you, product technology leaders like you, get clarity on the path from a product, agile theater, feature factory, to becoming an empowered, outcome-oriented, scalable product organization.
Okay, perfect. Now, here's a couple things that I see when I hear this. When I hear, so you described beautifully what you do, right? You're helping, basically take people from agile theater to traction, right? The way you described it, I think, made sense to me as someone who's been in that space. When we talk about the headline, pursue a product transformation, that means something different to me than operational efficiency or my product, if I'm trying to fix product ops. Like, product transformation feels different, like a different language and a different problem I'm trying to solve versus fixing my product ops. Does that resonate?
What does it mean to you, just out of curiosity?
it feels a little general. So when you say product transformation, that doesn't equate to process for me. It doesn't, I don't get ops out of that.
And I'm not limiting myself to process. I'm
Okay.
limiting myself to the operating model, to ways of working, ways of organizing, organizational culture. Some people say
Okay.
product operating model, but that's a bit specific. I'm wondering about the name for the private podcast, but as well as the offering around it. But
That's
it is
fair.
what people consider a product transformation for their organization. It's, if you're...
Versus a process transformation?
Yes. You're transforming your process and other things, your people structure, your tooling, the way you measure things. You're transforming all of these things towards becoming a product-oriented organization, a product-forward organization, an organization that looks more like Spotify and organizations like that than a feature factory.
Right.
That's a common term in this world.
Okay, that makes sense. I think from usually lead magnets or demonstration of expertise assets is they work better when they're more specific. And so they join the conversation that's happening inside our prospect's mind. So if our prospect is in pain because their processes are horrific and it's generating chaos and rework and it's slowing them down and it's causing all of this pain inside the operations, that's usually where we have the title reflect that. We have our headlines reflect that. We don't always start at the end in mind because they're usually not, they can't, especially if it's so painful, like something like process ops is such a big insurmountable thing for a lot of these folks that they can't even visualize what it's going to look like at the end of that, getting through all of that work. And they're just in a lot of pain first. So we start the conversation at point A, which is where they're at today. And then through the content of the asset, we will ultimately help show them and demonstrate like where they can get to for point B. And that's through your framework, through your approach, through case studies, like through, stories that you tell them through that audio. But usually this type of a lead magnet or a demonstration asset would be, from a positioning standpoint, more powerful and get more opt-ins if we start in that pain point, like what's top of mind for your ideal prospect.
So that's something I've been on the fence on. I hear what you're saying. Something else to keep in mind is that they're already hearing, a lot of them are already hearing about product transformation, product operating model. They've invested in agile transformations already.
Sure.
They feel the pain of there's so much confusion. Everybody's throwing buzzwords at us.
Yes.
We don't know what to do, and it's sometimes even more painful than the actual pain of the ways of working is the fact that they feel pulled in different directions and they don't know how to navigate all of this buzz. It's like, the problem that the story with Gen AI, let's say, a lot of the time what you hear these days is not, I have this pain in my organization and let's start with the pain that processes are inefficient and we want to do something about them. A lot of people are facing the pain of we're asked to do something about AI. Our board is telling us to do something about AI. Our peers are doing something about AI. We have to do something about AI. So they jump to do something about AI, even though they don't really connect it to pains. I think it's an issue, right? It's an issue that they go and jump and do something about AI or do a product operating model without connecting it to the pain. And that's the content of my podcast, actually, this disconnect. What I'm trying to figure out is what's the language to bring them in? Is it to talk about the internal problems they're facing or the fact that they're in this buzzword bingo that is causing pain?
I think you can acknowledge the buzzword bingo for sure. I mean, I sat in meetings with bingo cards with buzzwords on it with consultants. I mean, that's how bad it got. So I respect that because we had a lot of bingo games with that. But I think that's another reason to avoid the phrase product transformation because it does feel a little buzzwordy and it doesn't feel like they're actually going to get the no fluff, like just give it to me straight, which is what they ultimately want. They don't want more consultant speak. They want like, just tell me what's going on. And I think we could find something that's going to give them that feeling of a fresh approach. This is where it's like, I think finding that competitive white space in this industry is going to be really, really important so that when they read it, they're like, oh, finally, someone's just going to freaking tell me what it is instead of just continually using buzzwords. Like if that's the main issue that they're dealing with, then the words that we use should be fresh. Or, I mean, even if it was something like from agile theater to real traction, or something so basic that you're like, yeah, that's actually, it's simple, it's basic. I'm not using like agile theater. I mean, if you've been in an agile, that phrase is very familiar with anyone who's ever worked in agile, right? I mean, like, especially if you have dealt with the stuff that comes along with it. So I think you could be that clear and still attract someone to say, yes, I just want to go, I want to eliminate all this nonsense and I just want to get to real traction because that's all I care about. I think you're bottom lining it could actually be more attractive to an executive.
Fair. All right. Yeah, this is another anecdotal evidence that moving to the positioning of solving the agile theater is better than saying, product transformation. So that resonates for me.
Yeah.
So let's assume we go for some language around that.
Sure.
How would you structure a private podcast to tell this story and eventually, hopefully get somebody to raise their hand and say, you know what, I need help navigating this?
That's a great question. In general, I'll give you kind of the conversation arc that we tend to use. And then I think we need to translate that into maybe you have some ideas on what that looks like for you. And so typically in a private podcast, it doesn't have to be super long. It can be, 3 to 5 episodes, anywhere from 3 to 7 episodes. It depends on kind of how much, don't say any more than we have to say, right? We don't need to make it extremely long. But I do think we lead with empathy in the sense that we want the person listening to this private podcast to immediately understand or immediately know that we understand what they're dealing with, almost using words that could articulate the problem and the pain better than they can. Or I want them almost nodding along like, yes, this guy gets it, because that's just a demonstration of your expertise is your understanding of it. So by articulating the problem, articulating kind of what they're probably dealing with on a day-to-day basis, that's going to ultimately help. So we do want to start with that. I think we can help them have some epiphany. So then we kind of move into, maybe shifting some false beliefs, like maybe if you think it's because of this, like then we start talking about your approach and your framework. So I think because this puts your unique spin on it, because they've heard lots of things. So what is it listening to your private podcast or your audio that they're going to have this epiphany? What is that aha moment for them that would make it like, oh, yeah, actually, he's right. I never thought about it that way. Now they're like, wow, this, they're leaning into you. So ultimately, we want to architect this language so they lean in. You're telling stories, you're sharing facts, you're sharing, statistics that help back everything up. And then you're ultimately making an invitation for them to continue the conversation. That's usually the arc of something like this.
Would it help to take a look at the arc currently in the private podcast?
Yeah, I think if you do want to just give me maybe how many episodes is it?
You're seeing it, right?
Okay, great. So you're welcoming them in. So navigating what they're dealing with, that sounds like you're absolutely leading with empathy there. Like you're probably articulating exactly what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I think you're setting the need. So I assume episode number 2, which is why a product operating model is needed. That's where you're likely talking about, you're helping them have the epiphany of why. So you're not just saying a product operating model is needed, but you're helping them have the epiphany of why it is. So I think that's probably, I assume that's kind of the epiphany that we're helping them have there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That sounds good. And then you're moving from helping them have the epiphany to, let's see, that third one, the key to success. Okay. So ultimately where they want, now you're starting to talk about
this is the vision,
stuff that they want.
What you might want. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is aspirational, but you're future pacing it. because right now they probably can't even imagine what that looks like. Scaling without losing agility. Yep, that makes sense. I also have seen, I would add, without slowing down here as well, because I think agility and timing is also important. I mean, developing products, trying to get things out the door. So that makes sense to me because right now that pain point is something that they're experiencing. So that fits. And then after you're talking about scaling without losing agility or without slowing down, episode 5, let's see. Okay. Yep. Strategic bets and portfolio level work. Okay. Now I think this is like painting the picture of what it could look like.
Yeah. This is, even a larger view of this.
The bigger picture. All right.
Yeah. And then
bringing it all together. Yes. So now you're tying everything you've talked about together into this product operating model that will make a real difference in their organization. So hopefully by the time they've listened to this episode, they've bought into the concept of a product operating model and they see how your components of this operating model can actually make a difference and achieve real traction in their organization. Because a lot of consultants will say, oh, we're just going to install this system. I mean, from EOS, and I'm not saying anything negative about EOS. Like there's a lot of operating systems out there. And so I think for you to articulate the components of your approach, when they get to bringing it all together, now they're fully bought in. Because what do we need at this point for them to work with you? I always like to think, like, what is it that I need? What beliefs do I need to build? What emotions do I need to create? What underlying fears do I need to address in order for them to get to the end of this audio and be most likely to say, I need to book a call with this guy, right? And so it's buy-in to your approach and buy-in to the fact that they need this operating model, this product operating model. And so if your episodes can do that, which it looks like from the outline, just looking from the outline, it looks like they do, then the natural next step for them would be to let's have a conversation about it. So one thing I do want you to do, and I would use your universal footer to do this. I assume you have like a discovery call or an initial call that I would make sure you're putting a link to that in the universal footer, because sometimes some of our clients don't need to listen to every single episode in order to achieve buy-in. Sometimes they're already halfway there, or they've consumed some of your other content on all these other platforms like LinkedIn or other places that you're posting. So I would make sure that you're having that call to action in every show note and in any emails that you're following up with after they opt in for this.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think the supporting copy can make it really, really clear who you're talking with. I think, just looking at your outline, the things you can make it intriguing, like the hidden signs that you're operating or you're running a feature factory. That speaks usually to product teams, like understanding the difference, probably between agility and true process-driven, or even just busy work. So like kind of, because I'm guessing some of their underlying fears is that they're not super efficient, because that's where the idea of operational efficiency comes in. And that's when they start panicking, like, oh, we're losing lots of money or time or whatever they're thinking. So I think based on what I saw in your content, it's just a positioning, testing different positioning. And then, we can test, as long as you've got your call to actions on there, I think then you start testing conversions to make sure the content is hitting. But right now, I think testing positioning and just changing a couple of things to make sure the message lands. And again, it could be the title, it could be some supporting copy here. I think, and again, clear outcome, results focus, no buzzwords, no fluff. I think that messaging and positioning is going to work the best with your audience. And then it's all about driving traffic. So we can talk about that next.
Yeah. Speaking of next. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So really quick on traffic, obviously your organic social, all of your profiles, you're going to share the link there.
I don't know. Is it organic social? Is it that obvious? I mean, that was my assumption. So. That was my assumption, but
I think organic social can be effective when we're writing shareable content. Now, shareable content that's the holy grail, right, of social media content. Is it worth sharing? And I think leaning into your point of view, making sure it's really sharp, I think if you can, and this is where that competitive white space really comes into play, if you can stand out, if your messaging can stand out from all the other consultant crap that's on the market, you're a lot more likely to get shared.
Mhm.
Also, it's something you can reach out to past clients and say, hey, I put together, this, you can call it, an operating playbook. You can call it a product ops playbook, and then say, like, you might, if you know anyone that might be interested, you can ask other people to share it too. I do think if you go speak anywhere, if you do lunch and learns, I think, all of those are really great opportunities to be able to, share, even have a QR code to your landing page. I think those are opportunities for you to share this as well.
I just had an idea too. I recently, someone posting on Threads about this is like, I don't know how much capital you have or like what you want to put behind this from a investment standpoint, like if you're trying to do free to see, but paid to get as many eyeballs on something to tell you quick is, we know you pay for time.
Yeah, I've done.
Time or money.
I've played with paid ads just to test whether this page is converting into the private podcast.
Another idea
Not sure that
is
that's scalable, but to see if it's converting is
cool. Okay, so you get the logic behind that. So another avenue that I could see possibly working with your people is possibly sponsoring a newsletter. Jordan Gill just recently put a private podcast lead magnet on a newsletter, and I think it depends on how much, but I could see your audience potentially subscribing to some newsletters that are related to the industry, possibly. And so that could be a nice idea. I know that doesn't cost. It's like a different way of putting money behind something.
Yeah.
The lead, the cost per lead probably is going to be more, most likely, than like a Facebook ads. But to kind of, if
I would
you
do
had
that
a
once
budget,
I'm convinced that it converts.
Yeah, well, yeah,
because
you could. Depending on how much,
it's a bunch of money without.
It could be. It could be. Maybe I'm thinking about like more. This person that was doing a write up on that investment was probably targeting smaller newsletters. I bet there's like huge newsletters in your space that's probably really expensive. But if there's maybe some smaller solo brand newsletters, it could be like $300-$400, $500, not like thousands. Because those people, it makes sense that they charge that much because there's so many eyeballs. So I see what you're saying. But maybe some of the smaller ones, could you give you some of that evidence quickly? Just an idea if your folks are into newsletters as well. So, all right, Yuval, it was such a pleasure talking to you. I know we gave you a lot of stuff to cover. I know you're definitely in the discovery mode. Keep us posted as you work on this stuff. Hit us up, obviously, in office hours. I know you've been coming to our calls, and hopefully we can help you flesh this out further as you start taking action on this.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay and Nora.
Thank you so much.
About. Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep us posted.
Thanks.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.